Britain's biggest supermarket retailer has 3,627 stores nationwide,
Thank you for shopping at Tesco.
with almost 50 million shopping trips a week and a turnover of £57 billion a year.
We're managing huge variables, making sure that we have the right products in the right shops at the right time.
It's a company that's been part of British life for over a century.
Excuse me, when are you closing?
Oh, you've got a few hours yet, madam.
Grab it.
But the tale of this retail giant is one of high-stakes risks.
How we got through the next 2 or 3 years, I really don't know.
Game-changing innovations
All the checkout girl has to do is pass the code label over the window, and the laser underneath reads out the code.
and fierce rivalries.
I can remember my boss at the time saying, "Those Yanks are parking their tanks on our lawn. We can't let them do that."
And it all began with a barrow boy
I'm really a trader. My business is buying and selling.
who became a knight of the realm, but who never quite left the East End behind.
If I might be very rude, you can't do business sitting on your house.
At perhaps the most difficult time in its 101-year history,
We were thrust into the middle of it. It's been hugely challenging for everybody.
this is the story of how Tesco became a supermarket giant, told by the people past and present
Yes, I'm the superhero in this store.
who made the company what it is today.
Sorry, my axe fell off.
During the night shift in stores all over the country, deliveries arrive and the shelves are restocked.
How was the trucks last night?
Where they got packed up, so we didn't get grocery off till after midnight.
It's 8 a.m. at the Newmarket Extra in Suffolk. Store manager Alistair is doing a handover with Garth, the night manager.
Have you noticed a lot more kind of toilet roll, pasta, tin goods coming in?
Yeah, we've had quite a bit of an uplift in that.
As well as catching up on the deliveries overnight, Alistair and Garth are checking that every part of the store is fully stocked.
And down booze, looking quite good. We're 100% on this, yeah?
Yeah.
That's looking good, mate. Looking really strong. Well done.
Yeah.
Right, we'll see you soon. Go home, get your bed.
The logistics of supplying stores this big are easier because extras are outside towns. But 40 years ago, after the death of Jack Cohen, many of Tesco's shops were on high streets in town centres. Moving out of town drove the company's race to the top of the retail league table. Bigger stores had bigger ranges and broader appeal.
Morning, Janet. How are you? How's Gaps this morning?
Not a lot, so store's looking really full.
Yeah,
Good availability.
feels in a strong place.
Yes, definitely.
The Newmarket Extra has 74,000 square feet of shop floor, and 16 trucks of stock deliver every day.
We do in excess of £1 million a week. We're a very, very busy shop, which is great, but you also have to be in the ball all the time because of the amount of products that go through the checkouts.
With up to 40,000 transactions a week at the checkouts, restocking the shelves doesn't just happen once in 24 hours.
At night, all the trucks come in, and then they've got to replenish all the shelves. And then the .com operation come in the morning, and they're picking up to 50,000 items a day off the shelf before 11 o'clock in the morning. It's just a colossal, colossal operation. The number one reason that customers choose a supermarket is availability of products, and they can get what they want. So it's a critical, critical thing.
And one of the most critical things in any supermarket is fresh produce.
My job is effectively to make sure that Tesco has enough fruit and veg to meet demand. It's a hugely emotional part of the business for people. It's fundamentally in everybody's baskets.
It's a key category, but fresh produce is one of the most complex parts of the business too.
We source from over 13,000 growers, 63 countries. You know, it's a true global business. The most challenging thing in fresh produce is really two fronts, the supply and the demand.
If demand from shoppers is less than expected, stores are left with a surplus. Food waste isn't just bad for the environment, it's bad for profits. Reducing it starts with what's on the shelves.
And we've got lots of different customers that are looking for different types and quality and price of products. We sell a wonky product and then we have a more premium tiers. So that allows us to take quite a broad spectrum of the farmer's crop, which gives them a better return and also reduces waste.
In the past, retailers rejected produce that didn't meet particular size, shape or colour requirements.
Bro, look at the size of this onion. Look at the size of this onion.
Nowadays, more of the crop is on the shelves. VJ at the Brent Cross Superstore in London is a fruit and veg inspector.
I look at stock quality to see if they're fit enough to be on the shelves. And we call it Weeby. Will I buy it? So if it's not good enough for myself, then it's not good enough for the customer. These are all products which haven't got dates on. So I'm just looking through quick quality check on something that should not be on the shelf. I mean, cucumbers, we've got about 1,000 here. They're very good. They're from last night delivery, so I know that's good.
In 2015, Tesco partnered with Fair Share to donate surplus food. 100 million meals worth has been donated since then.
It's been nice since the charities have started coming in because any Weebies that I couldn't sell, we give to charity. Before, we were throwing a lot of products away. You feel guilty because it's a shame to waste it. That's good.
Today, customers expect retailers to play a part in tackling issues beyond their stores. As the UK's biggest supermarket, Tesco is in the spotlight on food waste. But back in the 1970s, it was a long way from the #1 spot.
Outside show business, Cohen is the biggest showman in Britain.
When Jack Cohen died in 1979, the business he founded was in the midst of a high-risk transition. It had been hit hard by the economic difficulties of the decade, and his successors were battling to turn it around.
We had a company that was sliding away and not doing very well, and then the new generation came in. That was a crucial moment.
Seen here in a documentary from 1998, Ian McLaurin had been Jack Cohen's first management trainee. By 1979, he was the chief executive. And his vision for the company was very different from Jack's pile it high, sell it cheap operation.
We were pretty down market, very much down market, and Sainsbury and all the others were the posh boys. The business we wanted it to be was sort of right in the middle, so it was a classless store. That's what we were going for.
But before Ian and his team could transform the business, they had to boost profits to bankroll their plan.
Where can you get hundreds of price cuts that help keep the cost of living in check? Check out at Tesco.
They staked everything on a massive price-cutting campaign, Operation Checkout. It was a huge success, but the enormous increase in sales pushed the company's infrastructure to breaking point.
We just couldn't cope because we were then taking virtually all our merchandise into the stores, and most of the stores were tiny, tiny stores.
Operation Checkout was a milestone for the company because it was the end of the Cohen era and the beginning of the era under McLaurin. But it was also about reorientating the company. What that company had to do was sort of transform itself.
Reinventing the company from a cut-price discounter to a retailer that could be all things to all people was a bold ambition. But investing in a new distribution system and new stores hit profits. And an outside takeover was a very real danger.
We were changing the face of the business, and how we got through the next 2 or 3 years, I really don't know.
Ian McLaurin and his team needed to rebuild the business from the inside before they could compete with the posh boys of retail. It would take a new kind of store and a new kind of shopping to do it. This is the story of Britain's biggest retailer, from its origin on a single market stall to the supermarket giant it is today. It's a company that's come a long way from its early days as a cut-price upstart. More than 300,000 people work at Britain's biggest supermarket retailer. In every part of the business, there are people who've spent their whole career at the company.
I joined Tesco 32 years ago.
I've worked for Tesco for 26 years. Started in the bakery.
I'm a Tesco lifer. I've only ever worked at Tesco.
You are surrounded by goodness and temptation all day, every day.
27 years now. Yes.
It is difficult, but you can get by on just a little sniff.
I've been here 25 years. This January. Thank you.
My first ever job was filling fruits and vegetables. It was actually polishing apples.
I joined as a graduate trainee in finance.
I very quickly got promoted to work on trolleys.
And here I am, 30 years and one day later, still at Tesco.
Having long-standing employees makes sense for any business because it saves on recruitment and training. But it also has benefits for customers. Good staff morale makes for a better service experience. When historians at the British Library recorded interviews with Tesco staff for the National Archives in 2005, some of them recalled the company culture before the 1980s.
Here were a group of people who had a tiger by the tail. They were living and breathing this business.
I figured that Tesco was a meritocracy, that I would get rewarded if I was good enough.
It was a wild and anarchic place. I remember thinking, well, I must not be eaten alive.
In the early days, our staff turnover was absolutely sky high. It was just terrific. I hired a company to do a survey asking the staff what they thought of the bosses. And I can't tell you how bad it was. It was appalling.
Ian McLaurin is a Tesco lifer, but he transforms Tesco in terms of what the stores look like, how the staff are treated and recruited, and the perception of the company.
Ian McLaurin's vision of a classless store that could compete with the #1 retailer, Sainsbury's, would bring a total overhaul to every part of the business. It was a transformation that began at a time of radical change in Britain too.
Here comes the Prime Ministerial rover, bearing now Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister.
In May 1979, Britain elected the first woman Prime Minister. During her campaign, Margaret Thatcher made much of the impact that high inflation had on shoppers' budgets.
This is what £1 would buy for the housewife in groceries at the end of the Tory government in 1974. This is what £1 will buy under Labour today.
Operation Checkout had pulled in shoppers hit hard by inflation, but the huge increase in sales meant many of Tesco's shops were the wrong size in the wrong place.
We closed probably 200 or 300 stores because they just couldn't cope. We then had to go out of town, and we started to go for planning permission with councils out of town. And a lot of them were saying, well, we didn't like your lousy little store in town, so we're not going to have a big one of those out of town.
A decade earlier, Jack Cohen had predicted the move out of towns.
Where we have car parking, we can do a lot more business.
And Jack foresaw the problems too.
And I think they should be 2 or 3 miles away from the main shopping centres. But of course it does upset the main shopping centres, and the local authorities won't like it.
Jack Cohen had been right. Getting planning permission for out-of-town stores would take a new kind of architecture.
There is a style described as South Fork, so it's pitched roof, tiled, clock tower, slightly ranch style, but very, very importantly, it has a lot of free car parking.
The age of the clock tower superstore had arrived, and bigger stores meant a bigger range of products.
It's a very different experience. You now will have a cafe, very typically at one of these stores. They'll have a big baby section. So it's a different kind of shopping experience to what had been available in a British high street.
I look forward to my shopping on Friday. It's a day out, really. We go and have our lunch.
And from a consumer perspective, it's easier. You've got these big warehouses of choice and you can park. But from the retailer perspective, it makes operations so much easier. So you've got the economies of scale, which bring the prices down even more. So in many ways, out of town looks like a win-win for both the consumer and the retailer.
Managing much larger amounts of stock and numbers of shoppers in the new superstores meant investing in new technology.
All the checkout girl has to do is pass the code label over the window, and the laser underneath reads out the code.
Barcodes made stock inventory and checkouts more efficient. They were a game changer for retailing, and technology is still driving efficiencies in the supply chain today. Branston in Lincolnshire supply Tesco with its own brand potatoes. This factory cleans, sorts and packs 20 different varieties.
We have a lot of potato nerds here. We're unashamedly proud of how much frightening detail we know about potatoes.
But not all spuds are created equal, and not all of them will make it to the fresh produce aisle.
Our aim is that nothing goes to waste, but the challenge then is how do you get the most value from every potato that you bring in?
There are all sorts of places a spud can end up, and it's technology that decides each one's destiny.
So here we have the grading hall. You've got over 20 different lanes here that we can split the crop into all different grades. And all of these different sizes and shapes of potatoes could come off one plant. So you've got very big, you've got somewhere in the middle, you've got stuff that has already been damaged, you've got some really good looking stuff here, and you've got other stuff that was rotten, and that will come in with the crop as well.
Maximum efficiency and minimum waste come from using as much of the crop as possible.
Obviously what we want is the right potatoes for the right job. So this is the entrance to our grading machine, and when it's running it'll pack at about 18 tonnes an hour. And in here we have a very sophisticated camera system that takes 40 pictures of every individual potato, and it calculates the size, the shape, the weight, but it also looks at blemishes on the skin, and according to whether they're really minor or if they're major, then they'll go in two different ways.
Spuds that aren't right for a pack of potatoes can still end up on our plates.
So, for example, if the skin wasn't great, we would peel the product to then create a ready-to-cook roast potato. The ones that are maybe too big or too small, we would send over to Samworth Brothers. They're a big ready meal business, and so the potatoes become the mash on the top of Tesco cottage pie. It's a much better place for them to go and a great way of reducing food waste.
Using as much of the crop as possible helps keep prices low. Back in the 1980s, the company started asking customers what else they wanted apart from low prices. In 1983, an innovative customer research initiative began.
Tesco was an early pioneer of customer panels, and they didn't do it by half measure. There was a customer panel for every single store, and it was run by the store manager. They didn't just listen to what consumers wanted, they responded to it.
Despite changes to stores, customers' perception of the brand hadn't changed. As Robin Gray recalled in his interview for the Tesco tapes.
Sainsbury's was the dominant brand. I mean, Sainsbury's had a very clear proposition, quality. Tesco was still seen as pilot high and sell it cheap.
In 1989, a big money TV ad campaign with a comedy legend set out to change that.
I have an assignment for you. I want you to go out and buy some chicken from France. We've heard about a unique breed that lives free range near Bordeaux.
So they roam wild in these very woods?
There we?
Yeah.
But the first shoot on a £500,000 ad was almost as tricky as finding those chickens.
Dudley being Dudley, couldn't get one word right, making it up as he went along.
They are very free range, aren't they?
Having someone so well known gave a kind of cachet. Dudley stumbling around looking for his chickens was quite a humorous way of getting over that Tesco was more about quality and less about price. So it was kind of flagging up that it was a new era and there were newer ranges available in the shops.
Are they about as big with fluffy brown cheeses?
You've seen them?
No.
After a decade of expansion and innovation, by the end of the 80s, Tesco had the market leader in their sights for the very first time. But the 90s brought a recession and new competition. Tesco is the biggest of the big four supermarkets, ahead of Sainsbury's, Asda and Morrison's. But 30 years ago, the company was in second place, snapping at the heels of market leader Sainsbury's in a race for space to build out-of-town superstores.
Sites like these in the south of England can fetch anything upwards of £20 million.
Tesco was opening around 25 superstores a year. But as the new decade began, the economic climate was far from ideal for costly expansion plans.
There is no doubt about the problems we have faced in 1990. And I do not promise that 1991 will be easy either.
The economy had shrunk, inflation was rising, and retail sales were falling. Knighted the year before, Sir Ian McLaurin was now chairman, and a new recruit had joined the company.
When I was a graduate, his position was sort of up there with, alongside or maybe just below God. And we were going into a recession. So when everybody else was battening down the hatches, we continued to invest in opening new stores. And that proved to be a brave but absolutely the right decision, because that was the platform for us to be able to grow. Everyone else turned left and Tesco turned right. And that was down to Lord McLaurin.
Taking a different direction to their competitors didn't mean the company wasn't following what they were doing.
Well, we watched our competition all the time, so we knew what was going on. I mean, we weren't sitting in our offices. There's photographs of me in the sun going around Sainsbury and all that business, the enemy's approaching, which is all quite fun. I spent just as much time in the Sainsbury store or at Asda store as my own.
And a new type of competitor had arrived in Britain, one that was happy to embrace the image the business was leaving behind, piling it high and selling it cheap.
British supermarket giants face a new threat from German chain Aldi. The opening shots are being fired in what would be the first supermarket price war in nearly 15 years.
Tesco, as a retailer, had two competitive shifts going on at the same time. They had the introduction of the low-cost German discount retailer, but they were also fighting out the war with Sainsbury's for the top position as an upmarket retailer. So effectively, they're trying to fight it out with both of them.
A new value range in 1993 was a response to the discounters, and the company had a secret weapon in fighting a war on two fronts: customers.
During the early 90s, there was another shift to obsessively understand the consumer. If you go through the history of Tesco, when they've really focused on their customer and responded to what the customer wants, that's when things go well for them.
Supermarkets are meant to be convenient, fast. You don't have to stand in queues.
We made a promise. If there's ever more than one in front of you, we'll open all the checkouts till they're all open.
In 1994, the One in Front pledge was launched. The price tag on tackling customers' biggest frustration was £60 million. 10% of profits.
Will anybody ever abolish queues? Well, Tesco have.
With hindsight, asking customers how to improve their shopping trip, even if it came at a cost, seemed like an obvious thing to do. As Joe Doody recalled in his Tesco tape.
All we do is we ask them what do they want, they tell us and we give it to them. Well, what a simple solution to actually getting things right. But yeah, it took us 50 years to come up with that.
But customer feedback didn't just result in changes on the shop floor.
Morning, madam.
Oh, customer service manager, you've been promoted. I told you I'd put a good word in with the boss.
Thank you.
Can I give you a hand, madam?
It gave rise to a new slogan that would finally replace "Pile it high, sell it cheap" as the brand's defining principle.
I can show you if you like. Come this way, madam, and I'll open this till for you.
I'm afraid I can't promise anything.
Would you like some cash back, madam?
No, thank you. I can't be bought, you know.
Tesco, every little helps.
What's great about Every Little Helps is it's an ongoing promise to the consumer. Like, we're not going to stop trying to help you. And it's a recognition that actually small improvements around the margins can make a difference, and that I think really appeals to the mass market audience.
From wobbly trolleys to baby changing facilities and moving sweets from the checkouts, customer research drove changes on the shop floor. When Britain's fussiest customer, Dottie, arrived on our screens in 1995, Tesco had 1.3 million new customers. Nowadays, building customer loyalty extends outside stores. In Suffolk at the Newmarket Extra, there's one staff member whose job isn't strictly retail. Zara is one of around 500 community champions.
This store is a no food waste store. We donate every evening to 2 different charities and are local, and they collect meat, produce, bakery, anything that's going out of date that day. They will then come in that evening and collect it.
Zara coordinates charitable activities with local groups.
Thank you.
And she also deals with food bank donations from customers.
Especially at the moment during COVID, it's been a tough time for a lot of people. I think this is where community matters the most, and I think people are actually coming together and supporting each other, because nobody wants anyone else to go hungry. And to be fair, this day and age, no one should be going hungry at all.
During lockdown, Zara takes customers' donations to local charities. The Newmarket Open Doors Food Bank has been operating since 2008. Charles is one of the volunteers there.
Here we go, Charles. You all right?
Yes, thank you. This is fantastic.
We totally rely on the generosity of those around us, of the public and the local businesses that donate. Since lockdown kicked in back in March, we've seen record numbers of people. So we've been here for 12 years, and this is the busiest we've ever been.
Is that the last?
That's the last one, and then there's some Chris.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
It's a great feeling for us all, knowing that we are helping our community, and it's a nice feeling just knowing that you're helping somebody else, giving a bit back.
In 2020, customers donated over 9 million meals through stores. But in 1995, the company came up with a way to give something back to shoppers themselves. By the mid-90s, Tesco was rapidly gaining ground on Sainsbury's. The next big idea, a loyalty scheme, wasn't a new one. But there was a crucial difference, as Terry Leahy explained in his Tesco tape.
Computer technology had just developed to the point where you could give somebody a card and you could scan in at the checkout and get a record of the purchases, and in that way you could reward them.
New technology redefined customer rewards. The Club Card was the UK's first supermarket loyalty card.
At Tesco, we think the world of our customers, and we've been looking for a way to show our appreciation.
The beauty of Tesco's Club Card was that they were personalising rewards, so you would go and use them in store.
Customers got discounts based on their shopping habits, but there was a reward for the business too.
The Club Card was a brilliant invention because it offered more value to consumers, 1% off their shopping. But for Tesco, it gave them information, consumer understanding that they could respond to.
This was loyalty as no retailer had known it before, and that is a competitive advantage that nobody else had. It was a winning streak for them.
Within a year of its launch, there were nearly 5 million Club Card holders.
David Sainsbury said, it's nothing more than electronic Green Shield stamps. And that was a really sort of a Gerald Ratner remark, wasn't it?
Not long after introducing the Club Card, Ian McLaurin's team achieved an ambition almost 20 years in the making, becoming the market leader.
In 1995, they knocked Sainsbury's, their biggest rival, off the top spot.
Our customers liked us better than Sainsbury, so they came to us and they didn't go to Sainsbury. I mean, it's that simple.
By 1997, the company had set up shop in Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And they'd moved back onto the high street with metro stores because of the rise in convenience shopping.
My vision for the company was that we wanted to be the #1 quality food retailer. The city, everybody said, you'll never do it. You'll never overtake Sainsbury. And I think when people say that to you, you think, do it. Do it. We'll show them. We'll do it.
Having achieved what everyone said was impossible, Ian McLaurin announced he'd be stepping down after almost 40 years at the company.
To be involved from the very first time as a young trainee with Jack Cohen in 1959 and leave it as a #1 retailer in the United Kingdom with interests abroad and a profit of just short of £1 billion was fantastic.
He was a natural leader, massive charisma. Everyone looked up to him. I remember when he retired, he did a leaving speech, and everybody in that room stood up. He got a standing ovation, and as I looked around me, there were many grown men in that audience in tears, and that was Lord McLaurin.
And if it cut me there, really Tesco. I love the place. Ask my wife now, and she'd say he's never happier than when he goes shopping at Tesco. So quite sad, isn't it, really, that somebody was 83 years of age. So that's my emotional connection with the company. I love it. I love the place.
Terry Leahy, the marketing brains behind the customer-focused innovations of the 90s, was made chief executive, and a new age began. The company might have become the biggest supermarket retailer in Britain, but a new challenger was coming. The biggest retailer in the world. There are 3,627 Tesco stores in Britain. The innovations of the 1980s and 90s laid the foundations for the company's dominance, but just 4 years after it became the biggest supermarket in the UK, that position was under threat. In 1999, there was an earthquake in the UK retail landscape. The biggest retailer in the world arrived when Walmart brought Asda.
I can remember my boss at the time saying, those Yanks are parking their tanks on our lawn. We can't let them do that.
If the biggest retailer in the world comes to your doorstep and wants to play with your market share, any retailer, doesn't matter how strong you are, is going to feel threatened by that position. And that's exactly how Tesco felt.
The company studied Walmart's global supply chain and cut prices to compete. At the start of the new millennium, Tesco was still in the top spot, and it launched its online shopping service. With 1.5 million orders a week, it's now a massive business in its own right. At 8 a.m. at the Newmarket Extra, delivery drivers are loading up. 20 new drivers joined in 2020, but Paul is a veteran.
He's named King of the Road because it doesn't matter what traffic's out there, what crisis happens. You could have a burst tyre, you could have a broken down van. He'll always make sure the customers get their orders delivered on time.
If there's any problems, it always seems to land on me to deal with them. King of the Road it is. Here we go.
There are 14 vans at Newmarket, and each one is on the road for 14 hours with 2 different drivers.
I'm hungry already. Maybe I should have had breakfast.
Across 2 shifts, each van does an average of 36 deliveries a day.
First one. Oh, there she is, bless her. Waiting for me already.
But customers aren't always shopping ready when the doorbell rings.
We have had plenty of dressing gowns, underwear, bikinis. I don't think there is what you would call a type of person that we deliver to. It's like everybody wants their shopping, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to help. Go on then, young man, I'll be nice, I'll let you in. There you go. You're welcome.
In 2020, online orders accounted for around 12% of all grocery shopping. The surge in demand during the pandemic meant more growth than the previous 5 years combined.
Are the subs all right with the boss?
Yep, they're all fine.
Right, good, excellent, thank you. Hello. Right, see you later, thanks.
Almost 1 in 5 British households did their supermarket shop online in 2020. But Rachel is one of Paul's regulars.
Slightly easier for you.
I've got a 3-year-old, so it's just generally easier than trying to drag him around a shop. But then during the first lockdown, because I'm type 1 diabetic, so it was just kind of, I didn't want to go out and expose myself too much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. You too. See you later. Somebody's having a bad morning. Morning, Mr. Policeman. Oh dear.
Paul's got one last stop before he heads back to base.
Quite a few regulars that we deliver to. Most of the regulars that we do have like to have their own day.
Elizabeth has been using the home shopping service for 5 years.
It started when I became seriously ill, couldn't go to the shops, had cancer, and they've carried on weekly ever since. They switched me onto priority slots without a problem. They are a lifeline. For older people like myself, I think it's extremely valuable.
Right, see you later. Bye. Bye.
The van will be heading out for a second shift, but the King of the Road's clocking off for the day.
The best thing about my job, you know that you're helping people. It makes them happy, and that puts a smile on my face and makes me happy because I've done something nice for somebody else.
The events of 2020 meant an increase in sales for all supermarkets with online shopping services. But back in 2007, it was boom time at Tesco, and the company's position looked unshakable. By 2007, £1 in every 7 spent in British shops went into a till at Tesco. The company had moved into another 5 countries to become the 3rd biggest retailer in the world.
Then, of course, we had the financial crisis in 2008. Unlike other recessions where we refocused back on value, think we lost sight of what was going on with customers at that time.
In 2011, Terry Leahy handed over to Tesco lifer Philip Clark. Profits were at record levels, but there was trouble ahead.
And we became particularly focused on achieving our financial targets as opposed to focusing on our customers. We just took our eye off the ball. That was the start of the well-publicised challenges that we had up to 2014 and the financial misstatement.
It's a decade of two halves. So you've got horse meat scandal, an accounting scandal that will go down in history, plummeting market share and profitability. And then comes the arrival of Dave Lewis.
At Tesco, they say every little helps. Now the once mighty retailer finds itself in need of all the help it can get.
For the first time in its history, the company looked outside its ranks for a CEO. Dave Lewis came from Unilever. He had never run a shop before.
Dave Lewis really had his work cut out for him. That company was on its knees when he walked through that door. He had £2 billion worth of debt, and he had to turn that around.
The management team went back to basics, getting out into stores, focusing on customers, and working more closely with suppliers.
Dave Lewis wanted to take away any reason why consumers might go somewhere else. So he reformulated over 20,000 own brand products and offered a price guarantee on branded products. And that combination went back to offering value to the consumer. And then he was able to bring in a better service experience as well.
In 2016, the man credited with saving Tesco ran a management exercise to test how the business would cope in a doomsday scenario. It stood the company in good stead for the events of 2020.
When I first started, there were so many things already in place, social distancing and cleaning products, extra staff. They were well ahead of the game in terms of handling the pandemic.
Former flight attendant Daisy started at the Hatfield Extra during the first lockdown.
It doesn't matter what's going on in the world, this is kind of a safe place for people and it's an important part of everyone's day-to-day lives. So we've managed to keep that going.
For senior management, there's no question where the credit lies for the company's response during the pandemic.
I couldn't have asked for any more from the colleagues turning out every day to make sure that we can do our bit to help feed, clothe and provide other essential items for the country. It's not always been the case that working in a supermarket has been seen as something that is aspirational. You often hear people say, I couldn't get a real job, so I ended up stacking shelves. But one silver lining to a very black cloud has been the way that the public have appreciated the efforts of all of our colleagues. And if I had one ask when this is all over, it would be that some of that appreciation remained.
Hello, sir. You all right there?
In my 30 years, the way that my colleagues responded to this situation is the proudest I've ever been.
The coronavirus crisis is just the latest of the turbulent times the business has survived in its 101-year history. But throughout it all, at the heart of this British brand's resilience and its many reinventions, is the vision of one man, Jack Cohen.
We cater for everybody, and I think that is a lot to do with our success. We go out of our way to try and satisfy our customer.
Of course, the business has moved on a lot since Jack Cohen was around, but I think many things that Jack instilled into the business are still around today. Listening to customers was in the business then and is still in the business, and I think Jack will be incredibly proud, and he would definitely see his finger marks all over the way we run the business today from when he started it 101 years ago.
And Jack Cohen's first management trainee has an idea about what the governor would make of it all.
I think he's looking down now thinking, my goodness me, I didn't believe that when I started this, I'd have such an amazing empire. I think he would be absolutely thrilled.
Susan Calman, and I'm off for a week to the seaside. I can't wait. Join me for an ice cream and a holiday next on Channel 5.
Let's join Susan in sunny St Ives, brand new next.